And Akash, you said something, on an interview, someone asked you, how are you going to connect with people, in a
Mhm.
new area, a new
Mhm.
state? Do you know the local sports teams, all of that? That's gimmicky, right? I don't buy into any of that. I used to ask, I taught a sales class forever, and I used to always ask the group, I'd come in to these classes, brand new, most of them kids out of college, just graduated, or maybe they'd been in business for a year or two. And I'm, at that point, I had a fancy title, and, they understood that I was running the business. So I would come in and spend a couple hours with this group and talk to them, and I would kick off the sales portion of it. But I would always kind of start with, I would ask a group of 20, raise your hand if you think you have a ton in common with me. And this is before they knew anything about me other than my name, and I was the senior vice president running the business, right? So, there might
Mhm.
have been 4 layers of management in between me and the folks I was asking this. And I would ask this very deliberately. I would ask, if raise your hand if you think you have a ton in common with me. Not a little, a lot in common. I wanted them to raise their hand if they were confident that, without knowing anything about me, that they had a lot in common with me. And you might get 1 or 2 out of the 20 to raise their hand. And the reason, Akash, is they immediately think you are older than me, you have a fancier title than me, you've made it in your career farther than I have, you financially are clearly making a lot more money than I am if you're here talking to me. uh, you have a nice sport jacket on that I couldn't afford, or whatever, right? You drive a better car or have a nicer house. I
Yep.
think they think about where I am in life at this point and think about where they are, and they assume I shouldn't say I have a ton in common. And so then I would get a lot of people to not raise their hands, and I would say, okay, let me tell you about myself. I grew up in Michigan. I have a older sister. I played a lot of sports growing up, and I would talk about the sports I played. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked in a steel mill. They taught me about hard work. I have 2 young kids. I'm married to the same girl that I've known since college, college sweetheart. And
Wow.
I share a lot of like real personal stuff, but stuff that pretty much you could be describing anybody without a title, right?
Yep.
And I would give them, and I would say, I love deep dish pizza. I love fried chicken from Chick-fil-A. I tell them what I like to eat. My favorite show is The Office. My wife and I love to binge on Netflix. I like reading. Here's what I like to read. Here's my favorite music, country music, hip hop. I would share some and share as much as I could. Then I would say, okay, raise your hand if you think you have a lot in common with me. 20 hands go up, right? And
Yep.
the lesson there is, with every customer, with every prospect, with every person that you work with in
Yeah.
life, right? Especially if you are in sales, this is especially important. Whether you think you have a lot in common with someone or not, you're right? That's a mindset. If you think this person, I don't have a lot in common with them because they live in Texas and they're a big football fan, and I don't know a lot about the local football team, well, you've already sucked yourself out, and you're not going to have a lot in common with that person. But if you go in there thinking, well, we're all sons and daughters, we're all brothers and sisters, we all have friends, some of them are successful, some are knuckleheads, we all have kids and cousins and family that drives us
Yep.
crazy, and we all learned lessons growing up. If you go in thinking that, you can connect with anybody, right? If you just go in thinking, I have a ton in common, you and I, Akash, have a ton in common, right? And
Yep.
you know, if you just think that, right, and you don't think, here's the things that I don't have in common with Ian, right? I don't have. Here's things I don't have in common. I don't write for Forbes, so I don't have a lot in common with Ian. Who cares if I write for Forbes? Big deal. You do a lot of things that I haven't reached in my life, so that doesn't really matter. I think I think if anyone ever asks you that in an interview again, share what you do have in common with that person, right? And very quickly, by building rapport, asking a few questions, I can find 30 things I have in common with someone in about 2 minutes, just by asking questions of what they like to do on the weekend, what they did last weekend, where are you vacationing, tell me about your family. If I just start asking some open-ended questions like that, I can very quickly find a lot in common with anybody I meet. And I mean anybody, any personality, anything, if I choose to, right?